Chapter 1. The Canvas of the Open Road. The Arizona sun, a relentless painter, bleached the highway asphalt to a shimmering white. Evelyn Evie Miller, her silver hair catching the light like spun moonlight, squinted behind the wheel of her late husband's trusty but aging Ford pickup. He never let her drive, but he was gone now, so she would do as she liked. Dust devils danced like mischievous spirits in the distance, and the vast, ochre-colored landscape stretched out before her, a blank canvas mirroring the uncertain future that lay ahead. Evie wasn't a natural road tripper. For decades, her life had been defined by the predictable rhythms of school bells, lesson plans, and the quiet companionship of her husband, Thomas. Now, widowed for 2 years, she found herself adrift, her days stretching out before her, devoid of purpose. The small town of Harmony Springs, her destination, wasn't on any map worth mentioning, not really. But it held a promise, a whisper of something more, a chance to reignite a long-dormant passion. Evie clutched the worn leather portfolio beside her, its contents a collection of sketches, half-finished watercolors, and the yearning dreams of a woman who had always secretly longed to be an artist. After Thomas got sick, she couldn't bring herself to continue as an artist. She knew that he would have loved her art and would always encourage her to do it. This trip was her first step into that new world, one that was both unfamiliar and exhilarating. And it was important to take the time, no matter how afraid she might have been. He'd always chuckled at her secret aspiration, calling her my little Rembrandt with an affection that warmed her to her core. She'd spent her summers in the local park sketching, the wind in her hair. It was where she met Thomas. The aspiring artist part of her heart was the worst. Her artist block continued to grow. A fresh start was what she needed, Evie thought, in a small town, where people would be more appreciative of art, where it would mean more, where she could matter. Her journey had begun a week prior in Kansas City, the echoes of the familiar fading with each mile westward. The interstate, a concrete river teeming with hurried travelers, had held little appeal. Evie craved something more authentic, something that spoke to the soul of America. So, she'd taken a detour, trading the sterile efficiency of the modern highway for the faded glory of Route 66. As the historic highway began to unfold, with its quirky roadside attractions, abandoned gas stations, and weathered billboards whispering tales of bygone eras, a sense of anticipation began to build within her. The open road, she realized, wasn't just a way to get from point A to point B. It was a journey of self-discovery, a chance to reconnect with the past, and perhaps to forge a new future. A sign, hand-painted and slightly askew, announced Mac's Diner Harmony Springs' next exit. Evie's stomach rumbled, reminding her that it was well past lunchtime. More than that, it was a small family-owned store, something she hadn't seen in years and years, so she took her chance. Following the exit, the highway wound its way through a landscape dotted with mesas and saguaro cacti, the silence broken only by the cry of a hawk circling overhead. Finally, nestled amidst a cluster of cottonwood trees, she spotted it. Mac's Diner. The diner, a classic example of mid-century Americana, was a vision in chrome and neon. A bright red sign proclaimed Mac's Best Burgers on 66, its neon buzzing softly in the afternoon heat. The building, while showing its age, possessed a certain charm, a sense of history that resonated with Evie's soul. A long-forgotten piece of her youth called out to her, almost daring her to give it a try. Parking her pickup in the gravel lot, Evie took a deep breath, smoothing down her skirt and adjusting her glasses. She felt a flutter of nervousness, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. What if Harmony Springs wasn't what she expected? What if she wasn't good enough to make it as an artist? Pushing open the diner door, a wave of cool, air-conditioned air washed over her, carrying the scent of sizzling burgers, freshly brewed coffee, and a hint of something else, something that tugged at her memory, a familiar aroma she couldn't quite place. The interior of the diner was a time capsule, its walls adorned with vintage photographs, Route 66 memorabilia, and gleaming chrome accents. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, and a long counter, topped with formica and dotted with swivel stools, stretched the length of the room. A handful of patrons were scattered throughout the diner, a couple of truckers nursing cups of coffee, an older gentleman reading a newspaper, and a young family enjoying milkshakes. The sounds of chatter and laughter mingled with the gentle strains of a classic country tune playing on the jukebox in the corner. Behind the counter, a man stood flipping burgers, his movements efficient and practiced. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with silver-streaked dark hair and a kind face etched with the lines of time and experience. He glanced up as Evie entered, his eyes, the color of warm honey, widening slightly in surprise. Evie smiled and nodded as she began to make her way to a free stool by the bar, when he looked up again. And the moment the two locked eyes again, it was obvious that neither were strangers to one another. "Evie?" he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the diner. "Is that really you?" Evie stopped in her tracks, her heart skipping a beat. The name, uttered in that familiar voice, sent a jolt of recognition through her. "Mac," she whispered, hardly daring to believe her ears. "Jack McAllister?" The man's face broke into a slow, familiar smile, the same smile that had once made her teenage heart soar. The smile that she'd carried with her, like a talisman, throughout the long years. In a flash, it was obvious that all that time could simply wash away again. He began to call to her, and everything felt too intense to resist. She began walking quickly to him, before noticing something. The sound of the jukebox shifted songs, now playing their song, that of 1968, the height of their teenage love. And they had, then, thought that would mean forever. They could laugh about that, too. Now, what more could the pair accomplish? Evie didn't know what the next destination would be for her, but she knew with every fiber of her being that it would be fun to try, at Mac's. In this new small town, together, they would truly be happy. It just had to work out right. "Well, I'll be," said Mac. "If it isn't my little dreamer, come back to visit. Come back to visit and who knows what else." Evie grinned. It was him. Chapter 2. A blast from the past at Mac's diner. The air crackled with unspoken history as Evie and Mac stood gazing at each other, the years melting away, like ice cream on a hot summer day. The diner, once a bustling hub of activity, seemed to fade into the background, the sounds of chatter and laughter replaced by a pregnant silence, broken only by the gentle hum of the neon sign outside. Evie, acutely aware of the curious glances from the other patrons, managed a weak smile. "It's been a long time, Mac," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Mac, his eyes searching hers, reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of warmth through her. "Too long, Evie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Too long." He led her to a secluded booth in the back corner of the diner, away from prying eyes. Sliding in opposite her, he continued to gaze at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and delight. "I can't believe it's really you," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "After all these years, I never thought I'd see you again." Evie smiled, her heart swelling with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Me neither, Mac," she said. "Life has a funny way of surprising you." 1,000 questions swirled in her mind. Where had he been all these years? Why had they never reconnected? Had he ever thought of her? But she hesitated to ask, afraid of shattering the fragile spell that had settled over them. The bell over the diner door tinkled, announcing the arrival of a new customer. Mac, reluctantly breaking eye contact, excused himself. "I need to get back to work," he said. "But don't go anywhere. We have a lot to catch up on." As Mac returned to his post behind the counter, Evie settled back into the booth, her mind racing. Jack McAllister. Her first love. Her high school sweetheart. The boy who had stolen her heart with his kind eyes, his gentle smile, and his unwavering belief in her talent. The boy she had thought she would spend the rest of her life with. They'd been inseparable during their senior year, sharing dreams, secrets, and stolen kisses under the bleachers after football games. Mac had been drafted into the Army shortly after graduation. They promised to write, promised to wait for each other. But letters came few and far between as he struggled, his mind racing as he faced battle and loss in a place he did not want to be. As the weight of war fell over Mac, Evie fell away. But life had a way of derailing even the most carefully laid plans. Mac had been drafted into the Vietnam War shortly after graduation, his dreams of attending art school and building a life with Evie shattered in an instant. He promised to write, promised to wait for her, but the horrors he witnessed overseas changed him, leaving him a shadow of the boy she had once known. Letters became infrequent, then stopped altogether. After months of agonizing silence, Evie had reluctantly accepted the inevitable. The boy she loved was gone, swallowed by the war. She tried to move on, burying her grief and throwing herself into her studies. She became a teacher, found joy in nurturing young minds, and eventually married Thomas, a kind and gentle man who provided her with a comfortable and stable life. She respected Thomas, but always compared him to the love she lost, Mac. She never really loved him the way she loved Mac. But even as the years passed, a part of her never forgot Mac. She often wondered what had become of him, whether he had found happiness, whether he ever thought of her. Now, seeing him again, his face lined with the marks of time and experience, she realized that the flame of their first love had never truly been extinguished. Mac, after serving her a steaming cup of coffee and a slice of homemade apple pie, returned to the booth, sliding in beside her. "So," he said, his eyes sparkling with amusement, "what brings you to Harmony Springs after all these years?" "Evie Miller." Evie hesitated, unsure how to explain her sudden urge to embrace her artistic passions. I'm trying to start over, Mac," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always wanted to be an artist, but life got in the way. After Thomas passed, I realized that I didn't want to waste any more time. I needed to follow my dreams." Mac listened intently, his gaze filled with understanding. "I always knew you had a gift, Evie," he said, his voice soft and encouraging. "You were always the most talented artist in our class. I'm glad you're finally pursuing your passion." He paused, his expression turning serious. "So, what do you think of Harmony Springs?" he asked. "Do you think you could see yourself settling down here?" Evie looked around the diner, taking in the familiar sights and sounds. She thought of the open road, the sun-baked landscapes, and the promise of a fresh start. And she looked at Mac, his eyes filled with warmth and affection, and her heart skipped a beat. "I don't know, Mac," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's been a long time. I'm not sure if I'm ready for anything serious." Mac smiled, his hand reaching out to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not asking you to make any promises, Evie," he said. "I'm just saying that I'm glad you're here, and I'd like to get to know you again, if you're willing to let me." Evie looked into his eyes, seeing the same kindness, the same gentleness that she had fallen in love with so many years ago. And she knew, with a certainty that warmed her to her core, that she was willing to give it a try. "I'd like that very much, Mac," she said, her voice Chapter 3. Echoes of 68 in a jukebox serenade. A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the clatter of dishes and the soft murmur of conversations. Evie took a sip of her coffee, the rich, dark brew warming her from the inside out. The apple pie, its crust flaky and golden brown, was a sweet reminder of simpler times. As Mac refilled her coffee cup, his hand brushed against hers, sending a familiar tingle through her. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes, a silent acknowledgement of the connection that still existed between them. "So," Mac said, breaking the silence, "what are your plans while you're here in Harmony Springs? Where are you staying?" Evie explained her plan to find a small cottage or apartment, a place where she could set up her art studio and begin to paint. "I haven't found anything yet," she admitted. "I was hoping to start looking tomorrow." Mac's eyes lit up. "You don't have to stay in some stuffy motel," he said. "I have a spare room above the diner. It's not much, but it's clean and comfortable. You're welcome to stay there as long as you need to." Evie hesitated, unsure whether to accept his generous offer. Staying above the diner would mean spending a lot of time with Mac, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that level of intimacy. But the thought of staying close to him, of having the opportunity to get to know him again, was too tempting to resist. Besides, she reminded herself, it was just a room. Nothing more. Are you sure, Mac? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to impose. I wouldn't offer if I didn't mean it, Evie, Mac said, his eyes filled with sincerity. It would make me happy to have you here. Evie smiled, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Then I accept, she said. Thank you, Mac. That's very kind of you. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the diner, Mac closed up shop, ushering the remaining patrons out the door with a friendly wave. Turning the sign to closed, he led Evie up a narrow staircase behind the counter, the scent of dust and old wood filling the air. The room above the diner was small and sparsely furnished, but it was clean and cozy. A single bed, covered with a patchwork quilt, sat beneath a window overlooking the highway. A small desk, cluttered with papers and books, stood against one wall. A wash basin sat in the corner, a reminder of the building's age. It's not much, but it's home, Mac said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. I hope it's comfortable enough for you. Evie looked around the room, her heart touched by Mac's thoughtfulness. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and inviting, a reflection of the man who had offered it to her. It's perfect, Mac, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. Thank you. As she began to unpack her suitcase, Mac excused himself, promising to return later with some fresh towels and blankets. Left alone in the room, Evie felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had found a place to stay, a friend to lean on, and a second chance at happiness. She unpacked her art supplies, arranging her paints, brushes, and canvases on the desk. Looking out the window, at the highway stretching out before her, she felt a surge of inspiration. The open road, the sun-baked landscapes, and the quirky characters of Harmony Springs. All of it inspired her with images. She began to sketch, finding her confidence returning one step at a time. As the darkness deepened, a familiar melody drifted up from the diner below, weaving its way into Evie's thoughts. It was At Last by Etta James, a song that had been popular during their senior year, a song that had been playing on the jukebox the night they shared their first kiss. A wave of nostalgia washed over Evie, transporting her back to a time of innocence, passion, and boundless dreams. She closed her eyes, listening to the soulful strains of the music, remembering the way Mac's arms had felt around her, the way his lips had tasted on hers. The memories were bittersweet, a reminder of what she had lost, but also a celebration of what she had found. She had a new chance, a second beginning, and a chance to live life again. As the song drew to a close, a soft knock sounded on the door. Evie opened it to find Mac standing there, a stack of towels and blankets in his arms. I heard you listening to the jukebox, he said, his eyes sparkling with amusement. Brought back some memories, huh? Evie smiled, her heart soaring with emotion.
It did, she said.
It reminded me of how much fun we used to have. Mac stepped into the room, placing the towels and blankets on the bed. He turned to face Evie, his gaze filled with tenderness. We can have fun again, Evie, he said, his voice soft and encouraging. We just have to give it a chance. He stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch her cheek. Evie leaned into his touch, her heart melting at his nearness. I want to, Mac, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I really do. He paused, his gaze searching hers. Then let's start now, he said. Let's go for a walk. Let's see what Harmony Springs has to offer. Evie smiled, her heart overflowing with joy. She reached for her jacket, her hand intertwining with Mac's. Together, they walked out into the night, hand in hand, ready to explore the possibilities that lay ahead. The echoes of 68, carried on the wings of a jukebox serenade, promised a new beginning, a chance to rediscover the love that had once burned so brightly. The canvas of the open road was calling, inviting them to paint a new masterpiece, a testament to the enduring power of love, hope, and second chances. The night was just beginning. Chapter 4. Saving Max, a reunion with a purpose. The cool desert air nipped at their faces as Evie and Max strolled down Harmony Springs' main street, the moon casting long, dancing shadows that followed their every step. The town, though small and somewhat dilapidated, possessed a certain charm, a quiet beauty that resonated with Evie's artistic soul. Mac, a natural storyteller, pointed out various landmarks, sharing anecdotes and local lore that painted a vivid picture of Harmony Springs' rich history. He spoke of the town's heyday, when Route 66 was the main artery connecting the East Coast to the West, when Mac's Diner was a bustling hub, serving weary travelers and locals alike. He also spoke of the town's decline, when the interstate bypassed Harmony Springs, leaving it isolated and struggling to survive. Things haven't been easy, Mac admitted, his voice tinged with sadness. But we're a resilient bunch. We're determined to keep Harmony Springs alive, to preserve its history and its unique character. As they walked, Evie noticed a for sale sign posted in front of a vacant building. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the sign. "That's the old Harmony Springs Hotel," Mac said, his voice sighing with melancholy. "It's been closed for years. Used to be a grand place, back in the day. Celebrities even stayed there. We just don't have the business or money to keep it going." Evie was in love with the history of it all. The thought of sketching a historical place brought tears to her eyes, so she asked maybe I could start there? "It would be my thank you for your place." "No need," said Mac, "but if you want." He trailed off, and the two shared an unspoken longing. As they continued walking, they passed a vacant lot, overgrown with weeds and littered with debris. A sign, posted prominently in the center of the lot, read, "Future home of Burger Bliss coming soon." Evie stopped in her tracks, her blood running cold. "Burger Bliss?" she repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. "What's that?" Mac sighed, his expression turning grim. "That's the fast food chain that's planning to build a restaurant here in Harmony Springs," he said. "They're going to drive me out of business." Evie stared at the sign, her heart sinking. She had only just arrived in Harmony Springs, only just reconnected with Mac, only just begun to feel a sense of belonging. And now, a corporate behemoth was threatening to destroy it all. "That's not fair, Mac," she said, her voice filled with anger. "You've been here for years. Your diner is a landmark. They can't just come in here and take everything away from you." Mac shrugged, his shoulders slumping with resignation. "That's how it goes, Evie," he said. "Big business always wins. Small towns like Harmony Springs don't stand a chance. The power of big business is only as powerful as we let it be," said Evie, "and small town life. It is the essence of freedom." Evie looked at Mac, seeing the sadness in his eyes, the weight of his burden. She knew that she couldn't let him give up. She had to do something, anything, to help him save his diner, to save Harmony Springs. "What can we do, Mac?" she asked, her voice filled with determination. "How can we fight them?" Mac hesitated, his gaze shifting towards the ground. "I don't know, Evie," he said. "I've tried everything. I've talked to the town council, I've contacted the local media, I've even organized a protest. But nothing seems to work. They're too powerful. They have too much money." "We are too," replied Evie, "too stubborn to know when we're beat, and maybe even smart enough to give them a run for their money." The town was worth so much more, and she wasn't afraid to fight for it. He said, "But what if they don't succeed?" "This is where we make them," Evie said. "Here, we're strong, and we have each other." Evie was right. Small business wasn't just a way to live. It was a lifestyle to be celebrated and sustained. With a new wave of inspiration, Mac stepped forward. Evie took his hand and looked at him. His eyes were glowing with a new fire, a new love for her, for the land, and for the way things were meant to be. Evie and Mac began. Evie, putting on her thinking cap and with help from Mac, planned to ask all businesses for donations and promised to increase awareness to them. Together, they would be much more successful. That night, Evie hardly slept. Her mind was racing, filled with ideas, strategies, and plans. She knew that she was an outsider, a newcomer to Harmony Springs. But she also knew that she had to do something to help. She couldn't stand by and watch as Mac lost his diner, as the heart of the town was ripped away. She was no longer just an aspiring artist, seeking a new beginning. She was a woman with a purpose, a woman with a mission. She was determined to help Mac save his diner, to preserve the history of Harmony Springs, and to prove that small towns could still thrive in the face of corporate greed. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the landscape, Evie felt a surge of energy, a renewed sense of hope. She knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was ready to face it, side by side with Mac. The day dawned clear and bright, casting long shadows across Main Street. Evie rose early, eager to put her plans into action. After a quick cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie, courtesy of Mac, she set out to explore the town, hoping to gather support for their cause. Her first stop was the Harmony Springs Historical Society, a small, unassuming building tucked away on a side street. Inside, she met Mrs. Abernathy, a kindly old woman with a passion for local history. Evie explained her plan to save Mac's Diner, and Mrs. Abernathy listened intently, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "That's a wonderful idea, dear," she said. "Mac's Diner is a treasure. It's been a part of this town for generations. We can't let it disappear." Mrs. Abernathy agreed to help Evie gather support, offering to share historical photos and anecdotes that showcase the diner's importance to Harmony Springs. She also promised to spread the word among the members of the Historical Society, urging them to take action. Evie left the Historical Society feeling encouraged, her heart filled with renewed hope. She continued her journey down Main Street, stopping at every business, every shop, every establishment, sharing her story and soliciting support for Mac's Diner. She spoke to the owners of the local bookstore, the hardware store, the beauty salon, and the gas station. She spoke to the town's mayor, the school principal, and the local pastor. And she spoke to the residents of Harmony Springs, the farmers, the ranchers, and the retirees who had called this town home for decades. To her surprise and delight, she found overwhelming support for Mac's Diner. Everyone recognized the diner's importance to the town, its role as a gathering place, a source of community pride, and a symbol of Harmony Springs' unique identity. They pledged to sign petitions, write letters to the local media, and participate in protests against Burger Bliss. They offered to donate money, time, and resources to help Mac save his diner. As the day wore on, Evie felt a surge of energy, a sense of momentum building within her. She had come to Harmony Springs seeking a fresh start, hoping to reignite her artistic passions. But she had found something much more, a purpose, a community, and a reason to fight. She and Mac had a new reason to love and laugh. As she walked back towards Mac's Diner, her heart brimming with gratitude, she spotted a familiar figure waiting for her on the porch. It was Mac, his face etched with worry. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I was starting to get worried." Evie smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've been gathering support," she said. "I've been talking to the townspeople, and they're all behind us. They're ready to fight for Mac's Diner." Mac stared at her in disbelief, his mouth agape with surprise. "You're kidding me," he said. "You actually did it? You convinced them to fight?" Evie nodded, her heart overflowing with joy. "I did," she said. "We can do anything with a little hard work." But the work has only begun. Mac wrapped his arms around Evie, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank you, Evie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're amazing. I don't know what I would do without you." Evie rested her head against Mac's chest, her heart filled with contentment. She had found her purpose, her community, and her love. And she was ready to fight, side by side with Mac, to protect it all. That evening, as the sun set, the pair smiled and readied themselves. The next day was to be the final verdict, and they had all the hopes that they could be ready for whatever happened. Their relationship, their business, and their entire lives rested on this, and the world was ready. Their reunion was a reunion with a purpose, but the world doesn't always bend to meet one's own needs. Tomorrow would be the day that determined everything. Chapter 5. Brushstrokes of Courage. Despite the rising tension, the days leading up to the town council meeting were a whirlwind of activity. Evie, invigorated by a newfound sense of purpose, threw herself into the task of rallying support for Mac's Diner. She tapped into her artistic talents, creating eye-catching posters and banners that proclaimed "Save Mac's" and "Harmony Springs needs Mac's Diner." She organized community events, such as bake sales and car washes, to raise money for Mac's legal defense. She even convinced the local newspaper to run a series of articles highlighting the diner's importance to the town's history and culture. As Evie worked tirelessly to promote Mac's Diner, she also found time to pursue her own artistic passions. Inspired by the beauty of Harmony Springs and the warmth of its people, she began to paint, capturing the essence of the town on canvas. She painted the sun-baked landscapes, the towering mesas, and the quirky roadside attractions that lined Route 66. She painted the townspeople, their faces etched with character and resilience, their eyes sparkling with hope. She painted Mac's Diner, its neon sign casting a warm glow on the surrounding streets, its doors open wide, welcoming all who sought comfort and community. Her paintings, displayed in Mac's Diner, quickly gained popularity, attracting visitors and locals alike. People were drawn to her vibrant colors, her evocative brushstrokes, and her ability to capture the soul of Harmony Springs on canvas. Evie's art became a symbol of the town's spirit, a testament to its beauty, its history, and its unwavering determination to survive. It also became a source of income, as she sold her paintings to tourists and locals, contributing to Mac's legal defense fund. As Evie's artistic talents blossomed, so did her relationship with Mac. They spent their days working side by side, rallying support for the diner, and their evenings sharing quiet moments on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about their dreams for the future. Mac, inspired by Evie's courage and determination, began to open up about his experiences in Vietnam, sharing the pain, the loss, and the guilt that had haunted him for so many years. He spoke of the horrors he had witnessed, the friends he had lost, and the difficulty he had adjusting to civilian life after returning home. Evie listened intently, her heart aching for his suffering. She offered him comfort, understanding, and unwavering support. She encouraged him to seek counseling, to talk to other veterans, and to find healthy ways to cope with his trauma. With Evie's help, Mac began to heal, slowly but surely shedding the weight of his past. He found solace in her love, in her art, and in her unwavering belief in him. As the day of the town council meeting approached, Evie and Mac felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. They had done everything they could to gather support, but they knew that the odds were still stacked against them. Burger Bliss was a powerful corporation with deep pockets and a team of experienced lawyers. Despite their fears, Evie and Mac refused to give up. They had come too far, they had worked too hard, and they believed too strongly in the importance of Mac's Diner and the soul of Harmony Springs. On the morning of the meeting, Evie woke with a sense of calm determination. She dressed in her best outfit, a simple but elegant dress that she had purchased at the local vintage store. She put on her favorite earrings, a pair of silver hoops that Mac had given her as a gift. Looking in the mirror, she saw a reflection of a strong, resilient, and determined woman. She was no longer just an aspiring artist, seeking a new beginning. She was a force to be reckoned with, a champion for the underdog, and a warrior for love and community. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her portfolio, filled with her paintings of Harmony Springs, and headed towards the town hall, ready to fight for what she believed in. Mac's Diner and the town were about to come face to face with Evie's brushstrokes of courage. And hopefully it would be enough. She had a feeling that whatever the town decided would change it forever. Hopefully for the better. Chapter 6. Ghosts of the Jungle. The Harmony Springs Town Hall, usually a quiet and unassuming building, buzzed with an unusual energy. The small room was packed, standing room only, with concerned citizens, eager reporters, and a handful of slick-suited lawyers representing Burger Bliss. The air thrummed with anticipation, a palpable tension that could be cut with a knife. Evie, her heart pounding in her chest, stood beside Mac at the front of the room, their hands clasped tightly together. They had spent the morning preparing, reviewing their arguments, and bolstering each other's spirits. But as she looked out at the crowd, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were facing an uphill battle. The town council members, seated behind a long table, wore expressions that ranged from apprehension to outright hostility. Evie knew that Burger Bliss had been lobbying them hard, promising jobs, tax revenue, and economic development. The lure of such benefits was difficult to resist, especially for a struggling town like Harmony Springs. The meeting began with a presentation from Burger Bliss's lead attorney, a tall, imposing woman named Ms. Harding. She spoke in a polished, professional tone, outlining the company's plans for the new restaurant, emphasizing the economic benefits it would bring to the town, and downplaying any potential negative impacts. She presented charts and graphs, statistics and projections, all designed to convince the council members that Burger Bliss was the best thing that could happen to Harmony Springs. She spoke of jobs, revenue, and revitalization, painting a rosy picture of a future filled with prosperity and growth. As Ms. Harding spoke, Evie glanced at Mac, his face growing increasingly pale. He gripped her hand tighter, his knuckles turning white. She could feel his anxiety, his fear, his sense of impending doom. When Ms. Harding finished her presentation, she turned to the council members, her gaze confident and unwavering. "We believe that Burger Bliss will be a valuable asset to Harmony Springs," she said. "We urge you to approve our proposal for the benefit of the entire community." The council members nodded, their faces inscrutable. It was clear that Ms. Harding had made a compelling case, swaying them with her persuasive arguments and her promises of economic prosperity. Next, it was Mac's turn to speak. He stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly, and began to tell his story. He spoke of his family's history in Harmony Springs, of his grandfather who had founded Mac's Diner, and of his father who had carried on the tradition. He spoke of the diner's importance to the town, its role as a gathering place, a source of community pride, and a symbol of Harmony Springs' unique identity. He spoke of the hard work, the dedication, and the love that he had poured into the diner, striving to keep it alive despite the challenges and the setbacks. He spoke of his commitment to the town, his desire to preserve its history, and his belief in its future. "Mac's Diner isn't just a restaurant," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "It's a part of Harmony Springs. It's a part of our heritage. It's a part of who we are. We can't let it disappear." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with the faces of the townspeople. "I'm not asking you to reject progress," he said. "I'm not asking you to turn your back on economic development. I'm simply asking you to consider the cost. Is it really worth sacrificing our history, our identity, our soul, for the sake of a fast food chain?" His words, heartfelt and genuine, resonated with the townspeople. They nodded in agreement, their faces filled with emotion. Evie squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with pride. But as Mac continued to speak, Ms. Harding began to interrupt, challenging his claims, questioning his motives, and downplaying the diner's importance to the town. She spoke of progress, of modernization, and of the need to embrace change. Mac, rattled by her relentless attacks, began to falter, his voice growing weaker, his arguments less persuasive. Evie could see the frustration building within him, the pain of reliving the past, the fear of losing everything he had worked so hard to build. Suddenly, Mac stopped speaking, his face contorted with anguish. He stumbled backwards, clutching his chest, his breath coming in ragged gasps.
"Mac!"
Evie cried, her heart leaping with alarm. "What's wrong?" Mac, his face pale and sweaty, shook his head, his eyes filled with panic. I don't know," he stammered. "I feel dizzy." Evie quickly guided him to a chair, easing him down gently. She knelt beside him, her hand stroking his forehead, trying to soothe him. "Take a deep breath, Mac," she said, her voice filled with concern. "Just relax. Everything's going to be all right." The townspeople, witnessing Mac's distress, gasped in alarm. The room fell silent, all eyes focused on the ailing diner owner. Ms. Harding, sensing an opportunity, stepped forward, her gaze cold and calculating. "Perhaps Mr. McAllister is not well enough to continue this charade," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Perhaps he should step aside and let the town council make a decision based on facts, not on sentimentality." Evie glared at Ms. Harding, her anger rising to a boil. How dare she take advantage of Mac's distress? How dare she belittle his pain, his passion, his commitment to Harmony Springs? You're despicable, Evie said, her voice trembling with fury. You have no respect for Mac, no respect for this town, and no respect for the truth. She turned back to Mac, her voice softening with tenderness. You don't have to do this, Mac, she said. You've done enough. Let me handle it. Mac, his breathing gradually returning to normal, looked at Evie, his eyes filled with gratitude. He nodded weakly, relinquishing his hold on her hand. Evie rose to her feet, her gaze fixed on Miss Harding. She straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped forward, ready to face the corporate shark. But as she looked out at the crowd, she saw a flicker of something in their eyes, a spark of recognition, a glimmer of understanding. They had witnessed Mac's distress, they had heard his heartfelt words, and they had seen the genuine love and passion that he had for Harmony Springs. They were starting to see the truth, to understand the value of what they were about to lose. And they were starting to realize that it was up to them to save it. Evie changed her strategy last minute and said with all due respect, I did not come here to talk to you about business. I know we are all business people, but let me talk to you about what's most important.
Let me talk to you about who.
Then, she noticed Mac get up and make his way to her. You know.
She's right.
And the what is not important, it is the who. Let me tell you a little bit about. Mac's voice trailed off again. Tell me some stories of your years at war? Evie suggested. And with those words, Mac began. The scene unfolded as if before their eyes, and for the first time, they felt truly seen. He described the jungles, the heat, the constant fear. He spoke of the camaraderie, the brotherhood, and the unwavering loyalty that bound the soldiers together. He spoke of the loss, the pain, and the guilt that haunted him still. He spoke of a young man, barely out of high school, who had saved his life during a firefight. He had taken a bullet meant for Mac, sacrificing himself so that Mac could live. I never forgot him, Mac said, his voice trembling with emotion. I promised myself that I would live my life in a way that would honor his sacrifice. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with the faces of the townspeople. That's why I came back to Harmony Springs, he said. That's why I reopened the diner. I wanted to create a place where people could come together, to share stories, to build community, to honor the memory of those who have gone before us. He looked at Ms. Harding, his eyes filled with determination. I know that Burger Bliss offers jobs, revenue, and economic development, he said. But it can't offer what Mac's Diner offers, a sense of belonging, a sense of history, a sense of community. He paused, his gaze softening with tenderness. I'm not just fighting for my diner, he said. I'm fighting for the soul of Harmony Springs. And I'm not going to give up. As Mac finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. The townspeople, moved by his story, stood to their feet, their faces filled with admiration and support. Even some of the town council members, previously swayed by Ms. Harding's arguments, began to shift in their seats, their expressions softening with empathy. Evie looked at Mac, her heart overflowing with love. He had faced his demons, he had shared his pain, and he had inspired the town to fight for what they believed in. He was a true hero, a true champion for Harmony Springs. Ms. Harding, realizing that she was losing control of the situation, tried to regain the upper hand. With all due respect, Mr. McAllister, she said, her voice cold and condescending, your personal story is touching, but it doesn't change the fact that Burger Bliss will bring significant economic benefits to this town. Economic benefits aren't everything, Ms. Harding, Evie interjected, her voice filled with conviction. There are things that are more important than money. Community, history, and heart. And those are things that Burger Bliss can never offer. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with the faces of the townspeople. We're not against progress, she said. But we believe that progress should enhance our community, not destroy it. We believe that we can have economic development without sacrificing our identity, our soul, our values. She looked at the town council members, her eyes pleading for understanding. We urge you to reject Burger Bliss's proposal, she said. Choose community over greed, choose history over modernization, Choose heart over money. Choose Harmony Springs. As Evie finished speaking, the room erupted in cheers. The townspeople, united in their support for Mac's Diner, stood to their feet, their voices echoing through the town hall. The town council members, swayed by the outpouring of support, looked at each other, their faces filled with indecision. They knew that they had a difficult decision to make, one that would shape the future of Harmony Springs for years to come. The meeting was adjourned, and the council members filed out of the room, promising to announce their decision within a week. As the townspeople dispersed, Evie and Mac were surrounded by well-wishers, their faces filled with gratitude and hope. "You did great, Mac," Evie said, her voice filled with pride. "You spoke from the heart, and you touched everyone in this room." Mac smiled, his hand reaching out to squeeze hers. "We did great, Evie," he said. "We did it together." As they walked out of the town hall, hand in hand, Evie and Mac felt a sense of peace settle over them. They had done everything they could to fight for Mac's Diner, and they knew that whatever happened, they had each other. Back at the diner, as the wait began, they knew that war and fear could return to their lives at any time. That evening, as Evie and Mac were getting ready to close up the diner, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. A woman in an expensive business suit stepped out of the car and strutted purposefully toward the diner. They braced themselves, expecting a representative from Burger Bliss to berate them for having the temerity to compete with their big business. However, as she strode confidently toward them, her gaze was friendly and gentle. Evie frowned in puzzlement. She realized that the woman was someone she had been expecting to see anytime soon, and now the time had arrived. With a big smile, the woman declared sorry to show up at this hour. "I'd like to discuss a compromise that I think might be agreeable to all parties." Mac shot Evie a quizzical glance before speaking to the woman. "A compromise?" he asked, and said that the diner had been around for years, and it is important that a large chain respects this. "It is important to understand that our voice is real." "Of course," said the woman, smiling. "I fully recognize your position. I too am from a small town that I grew up in. If you want to hear me out, I can come in sometime tomorrow and talk about it all." "Why not now, and what is this about anyways?" asked Evie. "All right," said the woman, "as you are both aware, the corporation is looking to open up shop in this area. And while you did touch my heart with what happened earlier, my CEO is worried that this might become a trend, a movement. Something that can kill a big business like ours." "So," replied Mac, "what does your business suggest for us?" "Your business would be allowed to keep standing, under our control." Mac said, "It will not happen without a plan in place to preserve as much history about the family, to respect the story. The people of this land. Not Burger Bliss." She said, "That is reasonable. I also like how you brought up Ghosts of the Jungle earlier. I can guarantee you a position of leadership in our company that speaks to what you had. People care about your war experiences, and they deserve to remember." Evie said, "With all due respect, Ms. Harding, what you say to us is that you will simply try and shut our business anyway. Our CEO will ensure that then we shall have a great fight then." "I implore you," said Ms. Harding, "the amount of money you get will allow you to keep going for decades." Mac, in a rare moment of extreme anger, said, "I can always get money when I want. This is just my passion. Don't pretend like we understand your love, your community, when it will never ever be." "As you wish," said Miss Harding, as she slowly drove off. But as she drove off, she revealed someone who stepped out of the shadows. Someone who was a long ghost that he was now ready to confront. His old commander, and also someone who was ready to ensure this town would turn into the next bustling hotspot. It would either prosper them forever or destroy them as we knew it. The two were ready to go into war, the veterans returning to battle. Chapter 7. A Proposal to Rebuild. The appearance of Mac's former commander cast a chilling pall over the diner, the evening's gentle breeze now carrying the scent of impending conflict. The past, long buried beneath layers of time and healing, had resurfaced, ready to unleash its unresolved demons. "What was that all about?" Evie asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she watched the black sedan disappear down Route 66. "What was he doing here?" Mac, his face ashen, his eyes filled with a haunting sadness, didn't answer immediately. He stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the spot where his former commander had stood, the ghosts of the jungle swirling around him, suffocating him with their weight. "That was Colonel Davies," Mac finally said, his voice hoarse and strained. "He was my commanding officer in Vietnam. He was the one who sent me into that ambush. He's the reason so many of my men died." Evie gasped, her heart aching for Mac's suffering. She understood now the depth of his pain, the source of his trauma, the reason why he had been so haunted by the war.
What does he want?
Evie asked, her voice filled with concern. "Why is he working for Burger Bliss?" "He's always been ambitious, ruthless," Mac said. "He's a survivor. He'll do anything to get ahead, no matter the cost." He paused, his gaze shifting towards Evie, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "He wants this town, Evie," he said. "He wants to turn it into another soulless strip mall, another cog in the corporate machine. And he's willing to use whatever means necessary to achieve his goal." Evie, her anger rising to a boil, clenched her fists. "We can't let him do that, Mac," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "We can't let him destroy our town, our history, our community." Mac nodded, his jaw hardening with resolve. "You're right," he said. "We can't back down. We have to fight. We have to protect what's ours." They spent the rest of the evening discussing their options, brainstorming ideas, and formulating a plan to counter Colonel Davies' scheme. They knew that they were facing a formidable opponent, a man with power, resources, and a ruthless determination to win. But they also knew that they had something that Colonel Davies could never possess: the love and support of their community, the unwavering belief in the importance of their cause, and the enduring power of their bond. The next morning, Evie and Mac, fueled by their determination, set out to rally the townspeople, informing them of Colonel Davies' involvement and urging them to stand united against Burger Bliss. The townspeople, shocked and outraged by the news, responded with an outpouring of support. They organized protests, wrote letters to the local media, and contacted their elected officials, demanding that they reject Burger Bliss's proposal. Evie, inspired by their unwavering commitment, began to paint a new mural on the side of Mac's diner, depicting scenes from Harmony Springs' history, celebrating its unique identity, and honoring its resilient spirit. As she worked on the mural, she felt a sense of purpose, a sense of connection to the town, and a renewed appreciation for the power of art to inspire, to heal, and to unite. Meanwhile, Daniel decided to work the angle in a way only a retired person could. For someone who spent a while building a career in law, Daniel found it quite easy to talk to people and use that charming voice to try and guilt Burger Bliss and Davies into doing the right thing. He knew, however, that something would be different, something special to try and tip the scales. And inspiration came to Daniel in the form of his art career. Word got around. As Mac got more and more popular, the town attracted the attention of people far outside the town. People wanted to see this classic town, but to see what makes the people themselves so special, they could spend a day and even see one of Evie's portraits and sketches. Daniel began his journey by doing research. For someone of their age, this involved endless nights, Googling the company that wanted their town, reaching the CEO. The goal was to get to the top, make him see how much he was taking for a simple $1. However, Daniel didn't want to rely just on emotion. He wanted logic, reason. He was going to make a compromise that satisfied everyone. "If it's good for everyone, it'll be good for everyone, right?" he had said to Evie one time, who only smiled and replied with a kiss. She trusted Daniel. As the days passed, the town council meeting drew closer. Tensions rose, both from the pressure and a nagging feeling that something was building up again, ready to unleash itself on their peaceful home once again. They had to win. One evening, as Evie and Mac were closing up the diner, a beat-up pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. A man in a faded army uniform stepped out of the truck and strode purposefully toward the diner. Mac, his face growing pale, recognized the man immediately. It was Sergeant Miller, one of the soldiers who had served under him in Vietnam. "Sergeant Miller," Mac said, his voice trembling slightly. "What are you doing here?" Sergeant Miller, his face etched with the lines of time and experience, looked at Mac, his eyes filled with a mixture of respect and concern. "I heard about what's going on here, Mac," he said. "I heard that Colonel Davies is trying to take your diner away from you. I couldn't let that happen." Evie didn't say anything, not knowing what to expect. What more was going to come from this seemingly harmless town? From what they could all see, it didn't look like it was going to end here. Max stared at the sergeant in disbelief, his brows drawn down and furrowed. "What do you mean?" he asked slowly. "I mean," Sergeant responded, voice serious and full of resolve. "I've contacted my old partners in arms to explain what has been going on. We've managed to collect enough money to be the voice this town needs, to get a proper say, and not to be taken advantage of. We heard of that old commander showing up. We aren't going to let a single soul give you a hard time. We're going to get justice." "Thank you, Sergeant Miller," said Mac with a wide and grateful smile. "I don't think my heart has ever known anything better. It feels so amazing to feel safe." This statement sent a shiver to Evie's heart and reminded her of the man in the jungle that she now stood with. Their lives may have been so separate, yet here she was. All the different steps that may not make sense, maybe they're in her story all along. She looked at the sky with tears, thankful for the beautiful life that she had, no matter the ups and downs. As the sergeant drove off, Evie put her hand on Mac's shoulder. "Well, that was certainly something," said Evie. "Yeah, and what was up with his friend in the back seat? Are you sure he wasn't threatening us?" Mac replied, concern etched on his face. "I think whatever happens, happens, you know? People are going to support us no matter what, that I do know," said Evie. It seemed like the tide had finally turned, and the odds were evening out. Perhaps big business wasn't the only path in life. The most precious moments are ones you cherish in small places, among the faces you care most about. And they were ready to present these thoughts to all of the town. Chapter 8. Greasing Palms and Broken Promises. The day of the town council meeting arrived with an atmosphere thick with anticipation and unease. It hung like a heavy curtain over Harmony Springs, the small town idol feeling precariously balanced on the edge of change. Evie and Mac, buoyed by the outpouring of support, still carried a knot of anxiety within them, the reminder of Colonel Davies's looming presence casting a long shadow over their hopes. Earlier that morning, Daniel received a phone call, an anonymous tip alleging that Burger Bliss was resorting to underhanded tactics, offering bribes to certain members of the town council to sway their vote. Daniel, sharing this information with Evie and Mac, urged them to be prepared for anything, to expect the unexpected. "They're playing dirty," Daniel said, his voice grim. "We need to be ready for anything." Evie took some time to paint her thoughts out, creating an image of what her painting looks like. She had hoped for a career that was stable, meaningful, and she got so much more with Mac and this diner. To think what she got now was to live and love another human, someone who had come from another world. She took their love, took the art, and put in everything she had for her family, for the team she built. The town hall buzzed with activity, even more so than before. The crowd was larger, more diverse, with a mix of local residents, out-of-town reporters, and a contingent of uniformed veterans, their presence a silent testament to their support for Mac. As Evie and Mac made their way to the front of the room, they noticed that several of the town council members were acting strangely, avoiding eye contact, whispering among themselves, their faces etched with guilt and unease. Ms. Harding, seated at the front of the room, smirked at them, her gaze radiating a cold, calculating confidence. Evie felt a shiver run down her spine, sensing that something was amiss. The world that she thought could have been beautiful in truth was still just as ugly. There were snakes, and the only way to do it was to deal with them. The meeting began with a presentation from Daniel, who laid out his plan for a compromise, a way to bring economic development to Harmony Springs without sacrificing its unique identity. He proposed that Burger Bliss build its restaurant on the outskirts of town, away from the historic downtown area, and that they agree to incorporate local themes and designs into their building. He would make a statement for future towns to follow to respect what it takes to grow in the face of greed, power, and outside influence. He also proposed that Burger Bliss invest in local community projects, such as the restoration of the old Harmony Springs Hotel and the establishment of a scholarship fund for local students. This money would allow for there to be enough incentive that benefited the town and respected what the diner meant. It seemed like a solid plan, a win-win scenario that addressed the concerns of both sides. But as Daniel finished his presentation, Ms. Harding stood up, her face radiating a smug satisfaction. "With all due respect, Mr. Daniel," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "your proposal is unrealistic and impractical. Burger Bliss is a successful company because we have a proven business model, and we're not about to change it to appease a few sentimental residents." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with the faces of the town council members. "We have made a generous offer to the town of Harmony Springs," she said. "We urge you to accept it for the benefit of the entire community." The town council members, their faces now betraying their guilt, began to nod in agreement, their eyes avoiding Evie and Mac's gaze. It was clear that they had been bought, their integrity sacrificed for the sake of money and power. It was all about their legacy and the lengths that it would go to. The mayor, his face flushed with shame, cleared his throat. "We have carefully considered all the evidence," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "And we have come to a decision. The town council has voted to approve Burger Bliss's proposal." A gasp of disbelief swept through the room. The townspeople, their faces filled with shock and anger, began to protest, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage. "You can't do this," someone shouted. "You're selling us out. You're destroying our town." Another cried, "You're betraying our trust." A third yelled. Evie and Mac, their hearts sinking with despair, stood frozen, unable to speak. They had fought so hard, they had given it their all, but it wasn't enough. The power of corporate greed had prevailed, crushing their hopes and shattering their dreams. Daniel then looked to Evie and winked. The town had to be betrayed for a new opportunity to come to light. For what would she do next? But before the town could erupt into chaos, Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his voice booming through the room. "Hold on a minute," he shouted. "I have something to say." He walked to the front of the room, his gaze fixed on the town council members. "I served this country for 20 years, he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I fought for our freedom, our values, our way of life. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and watch as you sell out our town for a few pieces of silver." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with the faces of the veterans who stood behind him.
"We didn't fight for this," he said.
"We didn't sacrifice for this. We fought for something better, for something more. We fought for the right to live in a community that values its history, its identity, and its soul." He turned back to the town council members, his eyes filled with righteous anger. "I urge you to reconsider your decision," he said. "Think about what you're doing. Think about the consequences. Think about the legacy you're leaving behind." As he finished speaking, the veterans began to chant, their voices growing louder and more insistent. "Save Max. Save Harmony Springs. Save our soul." Their chant, filled with passion and conviction, resonated through the room, echoing the sentiments of the townspeople, amplifying their outrage, and challenging the council members to do the right thing. The mayor, his face flushed with shame, looked at the other council members, his eyes pleading for guidance. They looked back at him, their faces filled with indecision. The tension in the room was palpable, the fate of Harmony Springs hanging in the balance. Evie and Mac held their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests, hoping against hope that the council members would reconsider, that they would choose community over greed, that they would save Mac's Diner and preserve the soul of their town. But it seemed like the ghosts of those they were closest to would return to haunt them if they failed. Ghosts in their past, who may come back for them once again. To lose everything that they had now worked towards. The world that they knew. But it was all over as they heard the click of the microphone. The final vote had been cast, and it was all over. Or so they thought. Chapter 9. Mac's Last Stand. The silence that followed the veteran's impassioned plea was deafening. All eyes were fixed on the mayor, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. The weight of the town's future rested squarely on his shoulders. Finally, he cleared his throat, the sound amplified by the microphone, cutting through the tension like a knife. "Members of the council," he began, his voice trembling slightly. I need a moment." He rose from his chair and walked to the back of the room, disappearing into a small office. The wait felt like an eternity, each tick of the clock amplifying the anxiety that gripped Evie and Mac. The townspeople, their faces etched with worry, continued to chant, their voices growing hoarse, but their determination unwavering. The veterans stood like stoic sentinels, their presence a powerful reminder of the values that were at stake. After what felt like an age, the mayor returned, his face transformed. The guilt and indecision had vanished, replaced by a newfound resolve. He walked to the microphone, his gaze sweeping across the room, connecting with the faces of the townspeople, the veterans, and finally, Evie and Mac. "I have made my decision," he said, his voice clear and strong. "After careful consideration, and after listening to the voices of our community, I have decided to rescind my vote in favor of Burger Bliss." A gasp of disbelief swept through the room. The townspeople, their faces lighting up with joy, erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the town hall. The veterans hooped and hollered, their faces beaming with pride. Evie and Mac, their hearts overflowing with relief, embraced each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. They had won. They had saved Mac's Diner. They had protected the soul of Harmony Springs. The mayor continued, his voice filled with emotion. "I realized that I made a mistake," he said. "I was blinded by the lure of money, by the promise of economic development. But I've come to realize that there are things that are more important than money. There are things that are worth fighting for. And Mac's Diner is one of those things." He looked at Ms. Harding, his gaze filled with defiance. "I urge you, Ms. Harding, to withdraw your proposal," he said. "Your presence is not welcome in Harmony Springs. We are a community that values our history, our identity, and our soul. And we are not about to sell it out for a few pieces of silver." Ms. Harding, her face contorted with rage, slammed her fist on the table. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You'll all regret this." She gathered her belongings and stormed out of the town hall, followed by her team of lawyers. The crowd watched her go, their faces filled with a mixture of relief and triumph. As the dust settled, Evie and Mac were surrounded by well-wishers, their faces filled with gratitude and praise. The townspeople, their spirits lifted, celebrated their victory, their voices echoing through the streets of Harmony Springs. The next day, Evie and Mac, as if fate was on their side, discovered a business proposal from a different entity, a growing chain who truly sought to bring benefit to the town, for as Daniel discovered, had been working with the government to bring funds into rural communities for all. While that got underway, Evie and Mac got to relax a little and breathe once more. That evening, as Evie and Mac sat on the porch of their beloved bed and breakfast, watching the sunset paint the sky with fiery hues of crimson and gold, a sense of peace settled over them. They had faced their greatest challenge, they had overcome the odds, and they had emerged stronger and more in love than ever before. "We did it," Evie Mac said, his voice filled with emotion. "We saved our diner, and we saved our town." Evie smiled, her hand reaching out to squeeze hers. "We did it together, Mac," she said. "And that's all that matters." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a long shadow across the landscape, Evie felt a whisper, faint and indistinct, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. "Thank you," the whisper said. "You have protected my home. You have honored my legacy. You have proven that love, community, and heart are stronger than greed and power." Evie knew that it was the siren that the town loved. She had done well, and all the ghosts could finally rest. Her job here was complete. The words brought to mind an idea for another mural, one which celebrated the victory and that all good intentions would lead down a bright path if those close to them would follow as one, and to never let power stop their creative growth. Her paintbrush and ideas came. They had worked, all for an incredible opportunity to pass down stories, to connect to what they loved. Daniel came and said that all had gone according to plan. The town now had enough influence and money to follow any other path if things ever went out of control. Daniel then put an arm around Mac, who was teary-eyed looking at Evie, with whom she would spend her beautiful days to come. That night, they celebrated. Chapter 10. Painting Our Futures Together. With the threat of burger bliss definitively vanquished, Harmony Springs breathed a collective sigh of relief. A renewed sense of optimism washed over the town, a belief in the power of community, and a renewed appreciation for the simple joys of life. Mac's Diner, once teetering on the brink of closure, experienced a resurgence in popularity. Tourists, drawn by the town's newfound fame, flocked to the diner, eager to experience its charm, its history, and its legendary burgers. The locals, their loyalty unwavering, continued to patronize the diner, cherishing it as a symbol of their town's resilience and its unique identity. Evie's artwork became an even greater attraction, her paintings adorning the walls of the diner, the town hall, and various businesses throughout Harmony Springs. Her vibrant colors, her evocative brushstrokes, and her heartfelt depictions of the town and its people captured the hearts of all who saw them. She began to teach art classes at the local community center, sharing her skills and her passion with aspiring artists of all ages. She mentored young painters, encouraging them to embrace their creativity, to express themselves freely, and to use their art to make a difference in the world. As Evie and Mac continued to work side by side, their relationship deepened, their love growing stronger and more profound. They had faced a formidable challenge together. They had overcome the odds, and they had emerged triumphant, their bond forged in fire, tempered by adversity, and strengthened by their shared commitment to each other and to their community. Mac, inspired by Evie's artistic talents, decided to dust off his old sketchbooks and to rediscover his own creative passions. He began to draw, sketching portraits of the townspeople, landscapes of the surrounding countryside, and scenes from his memories of Vietnam. To his surprise, he found that art provided him with a new outlet for his emotions, a way to process his trauma, and a means of connecting with others. His drawings, displayed alongside Evie's paintings, added another layer of depth and meaning to the diner's artistic atmosphere. Together, they turned Mac's Diner into a haven for artists, a place where creativity thrived, where self-expression was encouraged, and where everyone was welcome. Life in Harmony Springs settled into a comfortable rhythm, a harmonious blend of work, love, and community. Evie and Mac, their hearts overflowing with gratitude, embraced each day with joy, savoring each moment, cherishing each other's company. One sunny afternoon, as Evie was painting in her studio, a young woman walked through the door, her face etched with anxiety. It was Sarah, a local resident who had recently graduated from high school. "Evie," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need your help."
I'm pregnant.
Evie, her heart filling with compassion, invited Sarah to sit down, offering her a cup of tea and a listening ear. Sarah poured out her story, explaining that she was scared, confused, and unsure what to do. Evie listened intently, her remembering her own youthful struggles, her own moments of uncertainty and doubt. She offered Sarah comfort, understanding, and guidance, sharing her own experiences and encouraging her to make the best decision for herself and her future. "You're not alone, Sarah," Evie said, her voice filled with sincerity. "We're here for you. We'll support you whatever you decide to do." Inspired by Evie's compassion, Mac decided to organize a support group for young parents in Harmony Springs, providing them with a safe and supportive environment to share their experiences, to learn new skills, and to build a stronger community. The support group quickly gained popularity, attracting young parents from all walks of life. They met regularly at Mac's Diner, sharing their struggles, their triumphs, and their hopes for the future. Evie and Mac, their hearts touched by their stories, offered them guidance, encouragement, and practical support. They helped them to find affordable childcare, to access educational opportunities, and to build strong family relationships. As the young parents flourished, their children thrived, growing into confident, compassionate, and contributing members of the community. Seabreeze Landing saw to it, with each and every one of them helping build back to life. Evie and Mac were hailed as heroes, their compassion, their generosity, and their unwavering commitment to their community earning them the respect and admiration of all who knew them. One evening, as Evie and Mac sat on the porch of their beloved bed and breakfast, watching the sunset paint the sky with fiery hues of crimson and gold, a familiar melody drifted on the wind. It was At Last by Etta James, the song that had brought them together so many years ago, the song that had been playing on the jukebox the night they shared their first kiss. Evie smiled, her heart overflowing with love. She reached for Mac's hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "I love you, Mac," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mac smiled back, his eyes sparkling with joy. "I love you too, Evie," he said. "More than words can say." He paused, his gaze turning towards the ocean. "We've had a wonderful life, Evie," he said. "We've faced challenges, we've overcome obstacles, and we've built a community that we can be proud of." Evie nodded in agreement, her heart filled with gratitude. "We've done it together, Mac," she said. "And that's all that matters." As they sat there, hand in hand, watching the sunset fade into darkness, Evie knew that their story was far from over. They had many more years to live, many more challenges to face, and many more opportunities to make a difference in the world. And she knew, with a certainty that warmed her to her core, that they would face it all together, their love a constant beacon, guiding them towards a future filled with hope, joy, and endless possibilities. As long as they painted their lives together, that was all that would matter. The journey may not always be clear, but it could be met. Chapter 11. Corporate Bullies. Harmony Springs was enjoying a sustained period of prosperity and growth. Mac's Diner thrived, drawing in tourists eager to experience its authentic Route 66 charm and Evie's mouth-watering home-style cooking. Evie's art school flourished, nurturing a new generation of talented artists who, in turn, contributed to the town's cultural renaissance. The support group for young parents, spearheaded by Mac, provided a lifeline for struggling families, offering guidance, resources, and a sense of community. Yet, despite the outward appearance of harmony, a subtle unease began to creep back into Harmony Springs. The tranquility was broken one day, in a news article, that one of the top leaders for Burger Bliss was now in the business department for the growing hotel business down the highway. That, of course, meant this may have simply been a battle won, but not the end. The news was a stark reminder that corporate greed never truly sleeps, that even the most well-intentioned individuals can be swayed by the lure of money and power. Evie and Mac, recognizing the signs, knew that they had to be vigilant, to protect their town, and to be ready to fight. "They're not going to give up," Evie said to Mac one evening, as they were closing up the diner. "They're just biding their time, waiting for an opportunity to strike again." Mac nodded in agreement, his gaze filled with concern. "We have to be prepared," he said. "We have to protect what we've built." They decided to convene a town meeting, informing the residents of the potential threat and urging them to remain vigilant. The townspeople, their memories of the Burger Bliss debacle still fresh, responded with an outpouring of support. They organized neighborhood watch groups, monitored local government meetings, and vowed to hold their elected officials accountable. They were determined to protect their town from corporate greed, to preserve their history, and to safeguard their way of life. As the days turned into weeks, tensions rose in Harmony Springs. Rumors swirled, whispers circulated, and a sense of paranoia began to permeate the community. People were suspicious of strangers, wary of outsiders, and quick to accuse one another of being in league with the corporation. It was a hard way to keep themselves safe, but it had to be done. People could not trust anyone except for themselves, especially after that old trauma had hit them. Evie and Mac, deeply troubled by the growing divisions within the town, decided to take action. They organized a series of community events designed to bring people together, to foster dialogue, and to build trust. They hosted potluck dinners, concerts in the park, and art exhibitions at the community center. They encouraged people to share their stories, to express their fears, and to celebrate their common values. Slowly but surely, the community began to heal, the divisions began to fade, and the sense of unity began to return. The people of Harmony Springs, strengthened by their shared experiences, reaffirmed their commitment to each other, their town, and their way of life. But were they enough? The town, unfortunately, had grown a lot more disconnected than before. The idea that they could depend on one another to keep them afloat was gone. It was each man for themselves, and the spirit had dwindled with the knowledge that the rug could be swept under them all if they are not too careful. One afternoon, as Evie was teaching an art class at the community center, a group of men barged into the room, their faces flushed with anger. They were local residents, farmers, and ranchers who had been struggling to make ends meet due to a recent drought. "We need your help, Evie," said one of the men, his voice trembling with desperation. "We're losing our farms, our livelihoods, our homes. The bank is threatening to foreclose on us." Evie, her heart filling with compassion, listened intently as the farmers shared their stories, their voices breaking with emotion. The drought had been devastating, decimating their crops, depleting their water supplies, and leaving them on the brink of financial ruin. They had tried everything, but nothing seemed to work. They were desperate, and they didn't know where to turn. "We need a loan," said another man, his voice barely audible. "We need money to buy new equipment, to drill new wells, to keep our farms afloat. We've applied for government assistance, but we've been denied." A third chimed in, "We just don't have anyone else who's ready to give it to us." Evie looked at the farmers, their faces etched with worry and desperation. She knew that she had to do something, anything, to help them. It's as if some power drew her to make things right at all times, and she struggled as she often saw the world as beautiful and full of possibilities. "I'll do everything I can," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I'll talk to the bank, I'll contact our elected officials, I'll organize a fundraising event. We'll find a way to help you, together." She knew that if the farmers left, there would be something for them to come back to. They were a lifeline. Without the farmers, the whole town would be nothing more than a memory of what life and liberty looked like. And so, with a new sense of purpose, Evie began to work. She found it easy. With the reputation she had gained from the people, it seemed a weight on her shoulders, but a beacon of hope to what she could become. As long as she did not fail, as long as everyone still had a purpose and a home to come back to, for the world could be ruthless. Chapter 12. The Veteran. The weight of the farmer's plight settled heavily on Evie's shoulders, a stark reminder that even in times of prosperity, hardship and struggle could still lurk beneath the surface. She knew that she had to act quickly, to find a solution to their financial crisis before it was too late. She immediately contacted Mac, sharing the farmer's stories and seeking his guidance. Mac, his heart touched by their plight, agreed to help in any way he could. Together, they organized a town meeting, inviting the farmers, the bankers, the elected officials, and the local business leaders to come together to discuss potential solutions. The meeting was well attended, the room filled with concerned faces. Evie and Mac presented the farmers' case, outlining the devastating effects of the drought, the financial hardship they were facing, and the importance of their farms to the town's economy. They urged the bank to reconsider its decision to foreclose on the farms, to offer the farmers a loan with reasonable terms, and to give them a chance to rebuild their lives. The pair felt that with everything they had, that everything would be fixed with a chance for life and change. It seemed to be on her mind all the time. However, not all good things could come to an end when she saw who was standing in the center of the bank executives from afar. "They're right. It's not just the land, but the people that depend on it," said the leader. To her surprise, the bank executives responded positively, expressing their willingness to work with the farmers to find a solution. They agreed to review their loan applications, to consider alternative financing options, and to offer them financial counseling. With new plans for everyone, there would be no pain for the people involved. Everything would fall as it needed to. Eleanor and Mac had pulled it through. Everything would be perfect. There was no more struggle. But as time went on, there were forces that had been building up during those peaceful times that were soon ready to strike. They had to expect it. There was no other way to prepare for it. Just ready yourselves, and what is to come. That's when Colonel Davies had decided to show himself again, and this time, with something much, much more. It was almost more evil. To not do it himself, but let it be the people, with their desires, fear, and their problems be what tears each other apart. He strode confidently into the diner, his uniform crisp and immaculate, his face radiating authority and power. The diner fell silent, all eyes fixed on the imposing figure. "McAllister," Colonel Davies said, his voice booming through the diner. "I've come to make you an offer." Mac, his face growing pale, his hands trembling slightly, rose from his chair. "What do you want, Davies?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to buy your diner," Colonel Davies said. "I'm willing to pay you a generous price. Enough to set you up for life." Mac stared at Colonel Davies in disbelief, his mind reeling. He had known that Davies was ruthless, but he had never imagined that he would stoop this low. "Do you want to buy my diner?" Mac repeated, his voice filled with disgust. "After everything you've done, after everything you've tried to take away from me, you think I would sell you my diner?" Colonel Davies shrugged, his expression cold and indifferent. "It's just business, McAllister," he said. "I'm offering you a fair price. You'd be a fool to refuse." He paused, his gaze shifting towards Evie, his eyes filled with a sinister gleam. "Besides," he said, "think of all the good you could do with the money. You could help those struggling farmers. You could support the community center. You could even fund Evie's art school." Evie felt a chill run down her spine. Colonel Davies was using her community, and her art to manipulate Mac, to pressure him into selling his diner. "Don't listen to him, Mac," Evie said, her voice filled with urgency. "He's trying to play you. He's trying to exploit your guilt, your compassion, your love for this town." Mac nodded, his jaw hardening with resolve. "You're right, Evie," he said. "I'm not going to sell out. I'm not going to let him win." He looked at Colonel Davies, his eyes filled with defiance. "Get out of my diner, Davies," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "You're not welcome here. You're not wanted here. And you're never going to get your hands on Mac's diner." Colonel Davies smirked, his eyes narrowing with malice. "You'll regret this, McAllister," he said. "You'll all regret this." He turned and strode out of the diner, leaving behind a trail of fear, anger, and uncertainty. Evie held Mac close, trying to comfort him, but she knew that the threat was far from over. Colonel Davies, a formidable opponent, wouldn't simply give up. He would find another way to attack, another way to undermine, another way to get what he wanted. The next day, a series of disturbing events began to unfold in Harmony Springs. A fire broke out at the community center, destroying the art studio and damaging the building. Graffiti was spray-painted on the side of Mac's diner, defacing Evie's mural. Anonymous threats were made to local business owners who had supported Mac and Evie's efforts. The town was under siege. Everyone's hopes for each other was waning, and their fear, fueled by an outside source, took over to a degree she had never seen. The ghosts had taken over once again. As if they had heard Colonel Davies and decided to help. Colonel Davies was intensifying his campaign of intimidation, targeting those who opposed him and using fear to control the town. Evie and Mac, realizing the gravity of the situation, knew that they had to act quickly. They decided to call a town meeting to rally the community and to devise a plan to protect themselves from Colonel Davies' attacks. The town meeting was well attended, the room aisled with concerned faces. Evie and Mac shared the news of the recent events, urging the townspeople to remain calm, to stay united, and to resist the temptation to give in to fear. "We can't let him win," Evie said, her voice filled with determination. "We can't let him destroy our town, our community, our spirit. We have to stand together, we have to support each other, and we have to fight for what we believe in." The townspeople, inspired by Evie's words, began to share their ideas, their suggestions, and their offers of assistance. They formed neighborhood watch groups, organized community patrols, and volunteered to protect the community center and Mac's diner. Mac even got a visit from his old Vietnam squad and was given a gun, though reluctant to hold one, said he understood that it was his final stand against Colonel Davies. They decided to reach out to the local law enforcement, urging them to investigate the recent crimes and to provide protection for the townspeople. Sergeant Miller, his loyalty unwavering, promised to do everything in his power to help. Despite their efforts, the atmosphere in Harmony Springs remained tense, the fear and suspicion palpable. People were afraid to speak out, afraid to show their support for Evie and Mac, afraid of becoming targets themselves. It seemed that the whispers were true, that ghosts did indeed want something for themselves. One evening, as Evie was walking back to the diner from her art studio, she was confronted by two men, their faces hidden by masks. They grabbed her, shoved her against a wall, and threatened her with violence. "Stay away from McAllister," one of the men growled. "Leave Harmony Springs and never come back. If you don't, you'll regret it." Evie, her heart pounding in her chest, her body trembling with fear, refused to be intimidated. She looked the men in the eyes, her gaze filled with defiance. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not going to let you bully me, or Mac, or this town." The men sneered, their faces filled with hatred. They released her, shoving her to the ground, and disappearing into the darkness. Evie lay on the ground, her body bruised and aching, her spirit shaken but not broken. She knew that she had to be strong, for Mac, for the town, and for herself. The love she had for everyone was all that could get them out of this rut. It was the only weapon she had against the cruelty that they faced every single day and night. She picked herself up, brushed off her clothes, and walked back to the diner, her head held high. The threat had been delivered, the message received. But she knew that the threat would do the opposite of its intention. She only burned more when someone got close to her love. She and Mac wouldn't back down. She wouldn't allow her to be bullied, to silence their story, and she wouldn't let Harmony spring down. The war had come home, and she and Mac were at ground zero once again. However, everything may not be as what meets the eye. Chapter 13. An olive branch. News of the attack on Evie spread like wildfire through Harmony Springs, igniting a firestorm of anger and outrage. The townspeople, their fear now replaced by a fierce determination, rallied around Evie and Mac, vowing to protect them from any further harm. Sergeant Miller, his face etched with fury, vowed to increase police patrols, to investigate the attack, and to bring the perpetrators to justice. The veterans, their loyalty unwavering, formed a protective detail around Mac's diner and Evie's studio, ensuring their safety and their peace of mind. They remembered what the commander could do, and how they should be ready to fight against it no matter what the odds would entail. The community center board announced a town-wide rally. They and everyone else knew they had to give a statement. People, more than ever, would have to understand that if people cannot be trusted, things may as well be over. Now, at a time where they were close to everything was not that time. It was the most dangerous moment. Evie, deeply touched by the outpouring of support, addressed the townspeople at a community meeting, her voice filled with gratitude. "I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart," she said. "Your kindness, your courage, and your unwavering commitment to this town are what keeps me strong." As the townspeople began to disperse, they were getting even more support that would take them to new heights. They would be fine after all, and in many ways, Evie and Mac were already a great part of something so special for what they were fighting. After the speeches, with the veterans patrolling, and all the townspeople having said and done what needed, Evie and Mac made their way into the store. Daniel had called a bit ago saying someone was waiting and they needed to be prepared, but he was busy looking at documents. There were all hands on deck at the time. As they entered, they were greeted by a man that felt familiar, but not threatening. Evie knew it was her late husband. For Thomas, the feeling was mutual. He said to Evie that he was her angel now, but there was a new journey ahead of them that even he could not comprehend. He was there for her. He respected her. They loved each other, and he would always stay in her heart forever. That was just one last person that needed to meet in peace, Evie figured. However, the person who was in there was far from her heart. It made her angry just looking at. There was a new face for her to know, but for now they had to deal with what was now in the world, ready to claim what was theirs. And all the beautiful souls, to steal their light away and turn them into ghosts. Colonel Davies sat and said he knew he may have acted a little rash. After thinking for it all, said his true love would have wanted him to do what was right for both sides. Mac stared and tried to swallow the fear down. This had to be a trap. Someone who was cruel, rude, what he may have had thought of when he looked in the mirror. There was no way he had suddenly gained all the goodwill necessary. He remembered the guilt he may have carried for what he has done, his duty, his responsibility in taking so many others. I will now close shop, and the two walked out, saying they needed a bit of time to talk. Evie nodded to Daniel and said she could take it from here. And as the town was as it ever was, life had to continue. Mac said, I know it's the right decision, and let that lead to what they were after. It was a true love that he may have never seen in his own life. If I have to decide and change things that have to stay, then let the new path come. It was time for a new venture. Chapter 14.
Waarom nans?
The tension in Mac's diner was thick enough to spread on toast. Colonel Davies, seated at a corner booth, radiated an unsettling calm, a stark contrast to the anxiety that churned within Evie and Mac. The aroma of sizzling burgers and freshly brewed coffee did little to mask the scent of apprehension that permeated the air. What do you want, Davies? Mac asked, his voice tight, his hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Colonel Davies chuckled softly, his eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Mac. I've come to apologize, McAllister, he said, his voice smooth and deceptively sincere. I realize that I've been overly aggressive in my pursuit of this land. I was blinded by ambition, by the desire to succeed. I lost sight of what's truly important. Evie, her senses on high alert, remained silent, studying Colonel Davies intently. She didn't trust him, not for a second. She sensed a deception, a hidden motive lurking beneath his carefully crafted words. What's the catch? Mac asked, his voice skeptical. You don't strike me as the type to suddenly develop a conscience. Colonel Davies sighed, his shoulders slumping with feigned remorse. The truth is, McAllister, he said, I've been reflecting on my life, on my choices, on the impact I've had on others. And I've come to realize that I've made a lot of mistakes. I've hurt a lot of people. And I want to make amends. He paused, his gaze turning towards Evie, his eyes softening with what appeared to be genuine regret. I was wrong to threaten you, Evie, he said. You're a talented artist, a kind and compassionate woman, and you don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. Evie, unmoved by his display of remorse, raised an eyebrow. What do you propose? She asked, her voice guarded. Colonel Davies smiled, a subtle, almost imperceptible curve of his lips. I'm willing to withdraw Burger Bliss's proposal, he said. I'm willing to abandon my plans for Harmony Springs. And I'm willing to invest in this town, to help it thrive and prosper. Max stared at Colonel Davies in disbelief, his mind racing, trying to comprehend the sudden turn of events.
Why?
He asked, his voice filled with confusion. Why would you do that? What's in it for you? Colonel Davies shrugged, his expression enigmatic. Let's just say, he said, that I've had a change of heart. I've realized that there are things that are more important than money, than power, than success. There are things that are worth protecting, worth fighting for. He paused, his gaze turning towards the window, his eyes fixed on the horizon. I want to help Harmony Springs, he said. I want to be a part of this community. I want to make a difference. He paused as there was a moment of doubt, his brow furrowing down in a confused look, as if his body was working against whatever force was trying to push him. What if it all turned out to be different? He asked. What do you mean by that? Asked Mac. Sorry, just a stray thought. Maybe my guilt coming back? Replied Colonel Davies with a light shrug. His body was not acting his own again. He, for whatever reason, genuinely wanted to do it. What if it was all a lie, and what if all the good intentions were never put into action? What would all the sacrifices mean? Mac had to interrupt, putting a comforting hand on Evie's shoulder with the news that the next steps may have come to their end, but that was perfectly all right for this, as things continued for the both of them. "I'm sorry, Colonel," Mac said, "but I respect your intentions. I also apologize for the pain and turmoil that may have went your way when this started." The two stared for a moment until Davy stood up and walked towards his car and off in the distance. Was this truly all? Did he truly leave all those horrible plans back behind them? With his body language, it definitely looked like it was, and with some new plans for what had laid ahead for what they could plan, that would just be all there is and be that. Then, what could all the fear have meant? Was this all something completely out of nothing? With a sigh and a breath, life was good, and the two lived on with more passion, love, and hope to carry onto the world. That was all they could have wished for. Chapter 15. A Vision. The days that followed Colonel Davies' surprising change of heart were filled with a cautious optimism. The people of Harmony Springs, while relieved that the threat of burger bliss had been averted, remained wary, unsure whether to trust the former corporate raiders' newfound commitment to their town. Evie and Mac, however, decided to give Colonel Davies the benefit of the doubt. They believed that everyone deserved a second chance, and they were willing to see if he was truly sincere in his desire to make amends. To try to believe, with all their heart, to allow this man to take himself to new heights. Was it possible? To their surprise, Colonel Davies began to make good on his promises. He withdrew Burger Bliss's proposal, effectively ending the threat to Mac's diner. He invested a significant amount of money in the town, funding the restoration of the old Harmony Springs Hotel and establishing a scholarship fund for local students. He even volunteered his time, offering his business expertise to help struggling small business owners, sharing his knowledge of marketing, finance, and management. He was going to do his part for what was here, what he used to do in that land. But he now, finally, wanted a home. One where his ghosts could rest as well, to leave the war where it should have started a long time ago. His actions began to ease the community that was in front of him, to believe in someone who wanted to be better. And all along he did care about his neighbor, but had to put on a mask to help achieve this. "I'm just trying to do what's right," Colonel Davies said to Evie and Mac one evening, as they sat on the porch of their beloved bed and breakfast, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and purple. "I know I can never fully make up for the mistakes I've made, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." Evie and Mac, touched by his sincerity, smiled, offering him their forgiveness and their support. They had come to see that Colonel Davies, beneath his gruff exterior, was a man of deep remorse, a man who was genuinely seeking redemption. They believed that the town was going to flourish and were ready to try for one another, to leave all the evil in the dust and focus on the good that could spread. As Harmony Springs thrived under Davies' guidance, Evie felt a creative surge wash over her. She decided to try and make something new, using everything she had been gifted along this journey. As if, without those events happening, she would not have been able to draw as much strength from all, and to bring together another image of the town that would bring so much hope for all to follow. It was to portray everyone, Mac, the mayor, all their friends, and to have it represent the heart of their community, what they believed, stood for, and what they have all done to help each other at the end. A new day for an ever-new community, for the lives lost could be the best ones remembered as time marched on. It would be incredible. As her new journey began, Mac sought to explore an option for all these people to benefit from, and began creating a committee to have everything checked, that this town would go on and nothing would happen without all to follow, and see if their heart was just as true. Daniel had finally calmed and got to share his life with who he loved most, after keeping himself busy for a long time. Everything was now right in their world, to get the help that they needed and to thrive, to make what would not work become. They all finally found home. They just had to get through some time, and, as usual, that was a long one indeed. But still, they may have had what was a good opportunity at the end. It then hit them that what they had with them was great, and was finally worth living in harmony with. That time had no end. To love, create, and follow dreams was the vision. Chapter 16. The Proposal. Years flowed into years, and a decade passed since Davies' surrender and since the end of the war against Burger Bliss. While that seemed to be a thing of the past, many of the townspeople never did forget, with them making it that much more important to stand tall when anyone new arrived. Life may have moved on, but some things never did change. And for Evie and Mac, there was still a story that had to be told. A tale of love. She had seen her dreams come back to life, had seen a better side come out in others who at one point she would never trust, and the town had now made this a new home that even she never saw to come. Today was going to be her day. And for Mac as well. In his mind, the time has come for him to ask. Ask his heart, his spirit, and his greatest strength if it was the right time to fully come together. He had always felt like he wasn't good enough, that he would have hurt her because of the war, and that it would have always weighed him down. There could be no way that he could ever live up to this amazing person that stood before him. But here she is, years later, more loving than ever, and more ready than ever to accept whatever he threw at her. She had the skill and the heart to carry him out whenever he would stumble. So it was then that Evie found herself wandering the desert roads. It wasn't a common occurrence for her, but she had to find a place to help paint out her masterpiece. It all felt right. A nice patch of the blue sky with the birds flying about and the sounds of wind chiming together. It all felt together.
To be at peace.
She began painting a landscape of what it may be, if they finally were as it was. To draw to show the promise she wanted. She had found the perfect vision, and it was all she needed. So the plan has begun, I see. A familiar voice drew her to see Mac, and she blushed knowing how nervous her heart was going to feel. With each step he took, it was as if those days were coming back, to their adolescence. Her heart was fluttering. Everything came together. I wanted to say that, he sighed deeply, I did not know what I would do with myself back then. To return to the world, and not be lost forever. You brought a new spark that I had not had in ages. And as time passes, I only seem to love what you bring, those brushstrokes of life that are what I have craved for.
He kneeled down.
Evie Miller, will you make the happiest man, or veteran, in this world and marry me? Evie began crying and threw herself at him, and they fell onto the desert lands and began kissing each other deeply for what was for the years, a connection that could finally be and never broken again. Of course, you old coot, said Evie as she wiped away tears, but only continued to smile yes. With that, the entire community of Harmony Springs had been invited and ready to celebrate two people so destined to be that after a long journey and a lot of time, they could make it official. The time has come. What this all meant, everything now with these vows would mean something so special for what was all around them. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the land, Mac knew that this was where he had always wanted to be. His family, his community, and Evie, his love, all there to share what it meant for them all. They would live on forever in this moment and continue with all those blessings. Chapter 17. Fighting back. The wedding preparations injected a joyous energy into Harmony Springs, a welcome distraction from the ever-present anxieties of the changing world. The community, united in their love for Evie and Mac, threw themselves into the task with gusto, transforming the diner and the surrounding town into a wonderland of homespun charm. Banners proclaiming Mac Evie, a Route 66 love story, were strung across Main Street. Flower boxes overflowed with vibrant blooms, and strings of twinkling lights illuminated the night sky. Mrs. Abernathy, the town historian, curated a display of vintage photographs and memorabilia, chronicling the couple's intertwined history with Harmony Springs. Daniel, ever the pragmatist, managed the logistics, coordinating volunteers, securing permits, and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. The band, a local gem, rehearsed tunes of lost love. While the wedding brought joy to many, Colonel Davies was not thrilled with the good news. He was going to try to ruin their happiness, to rip them from their roots once and for all. In his evil, there was only greed and the power that followed. As they set off the news, Evie and Mac were at peace with what would soon come to be. It was a war again, but hopefully, their greatest strength would be all to depend on at last. The community. Davies had gathered and found several to turn and use for evil purposes. They may have been the few, but it only took a small amount of poison to make the well impure for all. They needed to protect themselves, one at a time. It seemed like they could never have fun. A lifetime of never being able to let themselves enjoy the gifts of life. It hurt, but there was something in them to believe, in the beauty to believe. "You know, we don't need a wedding," said Mac, his face showing a grim demeanor.
What?
Asked Evie with surprise. "It's not worth it to have something happen, or for someone to get hurt in the midst. What's the point of all of this? I truly don't see a reason to," and with the setting sun in their eyes and so much left to do, the future, it seemed, was left very blurry. "It is not for a show or a ploy," Evie said, "it's for us." As she ran off to collect her thoughts, Mac realized it was not truly fair of him to rob her from her love, her dreams, the peace that may have been the thing that had never been gifted to her. To stand alone, to struggle and fight for any love when his only thought had been to hide. She, in truth, was the strong one who would always come back. And it was for their family, their community, that may have never realized it but needed them to be strong. To understand that all the support for good was worth it all at the end. He had to see her point and respect it. He had to protect Evie at all costs. His dream, heart, and future that may have been at hand. He wasn't alone. He never really had been. To follow, that he too would trust. And with a smile they could show just how much they wanted to have that future as one, and the power that the day to come, to bring to those who needed the vision, strength, hope, or for it to simply give warmth to what may have seemed a cold and broken world. They couldn't stop, and had to come together, so that life could blossom for all. The wedding was set to take place under the vast, open sky, just beyond the diner, framed by the majestic mesas and the endless stretch of Route 66. It was to be a celebration of love, community, and the enduring spirit of Harmony Springs. They were at the starting point, the blank state, for a long way to come, and have them draw their destiny the way that they saw fit, at every turn of life. Chapter 18. New Ventures. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and clear, a perfect Arizona day. The air was filled with a buzz of excitement as the townspeople put the finishing touches on the decorations, their faces beaming with anticipation. Evie, surrounded by her closest friends, spent the morning getting ready, reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. She slipped into her wedding dress, a vintage creation she had found at the local thrift store, its delicate lace and flowing lines a testament to her timeless beauty. As she looked in the mirror, she saw a reflection of a woman who had embraced her past, embraced her present, and was ready to embrace her future. She saw a woman who was loved, cherished, and supported by her community. And she saw a woman who was about to marry the man of her dreams. Mac, with the help of Daniel, was a bundle of nerves, pacing back and forth in the diner, checking and rechecking the arrangements. He smoothed his hair. Even so, there was a smile on his face. All the chaos was for something right, something so right, that it needed to happen so fast and so soon before any of their joy could get stolen once more. As the appointed hour approached, the guests began to arrive, filling the space with their laughter, their chatter, and their well wishes. Families mingled, friends reconnected, and strangers found common ground in their shared appreciation for Evie and Mac and what they stood for. The new day was coming, and it was going to be an experience for all to follow. The music began, the gentle strains of a guitar filling the air. Evie, radiant and beaming, walked down the aisle, her hand clasped tightly in her best friend. She was at peace, her life coming together, to follow what was love in all, and she trusted what those may mean when time came around. As she passed all the faces, all of them with something to think, something beautiful to share that touched her. As the sun bathed them in its golden light, they exchanged their vows, their voices filled with emotion. They promised to love each other, to support each other, to cherish each other, through good times and bad, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, for as long as they both shall live. To remember why they met, who they meant, and for every joy to be worth it all. The love that followed and the community that shared as they were joined would prove stronger with their union, all from what came for so long with the struggles. Their war was their love story, and everything came to a great end. Now it had reached its end. But still, some forces could not allow it to come together. to be in what they would want to find as it. There came a voice, shouting what they were not to come together. At least, not before it was what was truly right in their hearts for themselves. To find and have them realize what they both have in common, what could have built them up. Everything may have been in ruins, and everything has come a lot faster, as Davies was standing there now. He said to speak your words, and to have each all know now what it would truly be. The joy could not last. He said that it had been done with lies, not good. They needed their help, and there may have not been a lot of time for those who sought change if now it wasn't going to matter. This was war, it was going to bring a war. And so the time had changed with a gun. Davies said that he was going to fix the place for good. The townspeople, to much despair, took the gun from him to do it themselves, starting to fight. They agreed. No more lies.
There is no peace,
said Davies, but with glee only what those who don't think for themselves choose to follow. Freedom for one, shall be in a cage. The pair were left in despair, with nothing they could do. Daniel, with his connection, called for what help. Evie put her hands to her chest with what the day had brought forth, and her heart broke as she knew all the pain of this would amount to a world where she and Mac would never prevail, would never find hope. But it also came with so much love for her husband. He looked so tired. She just wanted them to live happily ever after, but for some, may that have been what was not meant. Mac was now going to lose it. His wife, to that kind of man who would have taken all that he had away with no issue, and to do with love something to steal. And she may have wanted to fight again. But the war has long haunted them. They would never escape it. This may have never worked out. The world didn't want them to have it. No matter how hard, true, good the two did, there would be none. Before she knew, Mac walked forward and shook Davy's hand, and went along with a small smile as the two began to talk and go outside. What is happening now? She asked. It was now, as they walked together to the distance and beyond to what the world was going to entail. He had made a promise. It had seemed, as time now would stand still to tell a different truth for our stars. To find their way to a better world where they knew, with nothing bad at all, no more hurt, only something new and amazing for all to come to make their world more full than those had ever imagined. It was only the beginning. Chapter 19. To fight or not to fight. The sight of Mac walking away with Colonel Davies sent a chill down Evie's spine. A wave of despair washed over her, threatening to drown her in its depths. Had she lost him? Had their love, their dreams, their community been sacrificed at the altar of some twisted bargain? She wanted to run after them, to confront Davies, to beg Mac not to do anything foolish. But she knew that she couldn't. She had to trust him, to believe in his strength, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to what was right. To remember she wasn't alone for any time. And neither was Mac, or what stood with their souls in a town that wanted to become more than the darkness they could see now. What did it all mean? She said. It had to come one way or another. Daniel told her that this may happen, or it would not be what the way things are with you. There was always going to be a fight that would never have a proper end. Evie said, I wanted love. I didn't want to fight. And that all was it. All she had ever wanted in this world was to be loved. To be seen for how she may have felt. Even now. Then let it all be. The remaining townspeople seemed confused as she stared as they began talking. Some murmured words of encouragement for her. Others were too shocked. And that all that was a story about time lost. She came to make some tough choices that would haunt her later, but here, it is to believe in the team, to never back down. All while her dreams continue, even in the face of it, that it is possible to reach the light. Or that it may all be in a world that can truly reach their vision. For as she lived to the moment, what she is could last beyond her. Evie waited as time had flown around. The sun was already gone. For Mac? Well, maybe not in their world. When she was walking to leave, Davies fell back in, someone who may have always been evil or something. All she knew was for Davies to stay with a small town. His heart needed something that he may not have ever gotten in the big world. Well, Mac gave me the store, he said bluntly, trying to smile. But as you can see, he paused for the greatest effect, I had a heart attack. I can't operate it, can't fight in any kind of war, guess I gotta be happy. It was like she was staring, or had become blind from all the good times or the evil. To remember her family is what was, from who she was, all her hopes and dreams. To leave it all behind. It did hurt. A lot. It may have been the greatest betrayal. It may have been cruel and sad. But there is a lot about humanity to be all that it may be. To say goodbye to something as a part of herself. The most difficult part was seeing him smile and wave, to tell her he wanted to set his things straight at long last. There was her love that could not last forever. Now it was as alone as what could entail. There is little that now touched her, connected to what was. That world was there, but could never see the truth and promise she was ready to have before. It seemed all was gone. Daniel began the move, but she asked to pause. All those paintings, all the work that was in them, all needed to be gone and released to whatever came for the future. Some she may have asked for the friends who cared to hold, a piece of the love. Evie sold the car, house, everything to create the new art school. It wasn't only about her anymore. It was about others. To let what was lost and now create a new world where everyone had to see there was joy to reach and the struggles that might make a life for it. And as for the diner, as she left it behind with the past now done, it was ready. The time had flown. Chapter 20. Happy Beginnings. Evie boarded the bus, leaving Harmony Springs behind, the rising sun casting a warm glow over the receding landscape. She gazed out the window, her heart filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. The town, once a symbol of love, community, and second chances, now represented a chapter closed, a chapter filled with both joy and sorrow. As the bus rumbled down the highway, Evie reflected on her time in Harmony Springs. She had found love, she had lost love, and she had learned valuable lessons about life, loss, and the enduring power of the human spirit. She had faced her fears, she had embraced her passions, and she had made a real difference in the world. She had become a stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate woman. She had followed her dreams, even when to do so was to break her own heart, in love with the person she was willing to give up at every step. How to live without him now, a true question. But there was no other thought. For that was the right thing, right way. And may have even been what Mac truly wanted. The love is past and something great is waiting, she may have thought. That thought seemed to haunt her the most, how to love now with none it. If he had been her world, and they now had gone separate ways, what was truly left? There is a whole canvas that only required a brush. After all, if the beauty that people talk about comes from within, she was so ready to spread around to all to follow, all to truly become a muse. With the money she would have gained, she finally established that school she dreamed about to have come along as people started to ask her for new pictures. A request came far and wide for those to see it, and in its journey, had spread to different artists all around the world. A great many, coming to pass down their skills for all those who longed to find an escape. A home to rely and call on that could create a beautiful world for them. Art did save their lives. What would it be for what lies ahead for others? Her new purpose now was not to create love, but to let other create to reach love for it could. That all could mean to be home, be great and true, with nothing held, as it can always come back. She, with her own struggles, was there to show she had survived and they could have it too. This was her fight and what was best. One day, she took her students to go around the world, to visit different places. She asked them all and said that the way things go for all will be what they want. It could have their meaning and their worth. Paint what may touch your heart and follow, for this is what matters with you for any new chance to be. When asked, she only told of a dream. She had to keep those she met by it to not turn the bad ones away, and let what has been a reason to show as to all people of all that they may ever be there was always something to protect, and it may be all but not something lost at long last. With everyone finding love in every city, the new school had finally brought. Everyone had all. With the years having passed, on another bus and on another path, the world was still ever there before her, her heart at warmth knowing that all she touched found beauty and may have, also at long last, found a piece of the beauty that shone before all. She was not alone in her peace now. Her life was just one of many, and if to share may that also leave something in store for others was her greatest wish from what came true. Her soul shone as now they saw the love all could have as who they sought. The greatest art to ever exist came on. So if in some part, with these characters that all were her had truly did touch and kind, would let others follow that is for that, and more to what we may have. Here we now are ready. It is what our heart knew to reach for that meant everything and nothing bad that happened in their way is what may have brought something else for joy. Here there will be one big painting. Epilogue. The tale of Evie and Mac echoed down the corridors of time, a whisper on the wind carried across the sun-drenched landscapes of Route 66. Their story became a legend, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the enduring spirit of small-town America. The Route 66 Diner Art School, founded by Evie, flourished, attracting students from all corners of the globe. Artists, young and old, gathered in Harmony Springs, drawn by the school's unique blend of artistic instruction, community engagement, and environmental activism. They learned from Evie not only how to paint, but how to connect with their surroundings, how to express their emotions, and how to use their art to make a difference in the world. Graduates of the school went on to become renowned painters, sculptors, photographers, and digital artists, their work celebrated for its beauty, its originality, and its social impact. They used their talents to promote conservation, to advocate for social justice, and to inspire hope in a world often overshadowed by darkness. Harmony Springs, once teetering on the brink of collapse, became a thriving arts community, a beacon of creativity, and a model for sustainable development. The town's economy boomed, attracting tourists, investors, and new residents eager to experience its unique blend of history, culture, and natural beauty. The old Harmony Springs Hotel was restored to its former glory, becoming a luxurious boutique hotel, its walls adorned with Evie's paintings and its rooms filled with handcrafted furniture made by local artisans. Mac's Diner, under the watchful eye of a new generation of owners, continued to serve its legendary burgers, its doors open wide, welcoming travelers and locals alike. The diner became a pilgrimage site for Route 66 enthusiasts, a place where they could experience the authentic charm of a bygone era. Even if the diner was in the hands of those they were closest to, they would all think of the pair and what their story did to change them. Make them new people, and those would make all that had seemed hurt then hurt no longer. The memory of all these individuals will never truly last, and that may or may not matter as their impact was more on their town. And the new hands will work on with all the respect and wisdom they may have gained and gotten, not only them, to see it to its future. It also all started a long time ago, not just the town but their love. And as long as that message rang through, then it would all have happened, to mean a good tale. The purpose to get stronger, bolder, as time flew high and the world went ahead altogether. And their names would one day fade, be but a memory lost. But a community as beautiful as them, may it have forever seen how the stars shine bright under what the best hearts can be. To hold on to dreams that could never stop existing for a life to truly last. The way that they truly could see, in each brushstroke. But what they would have done will never be as what the eye can reach. It's for it all to simply bloom again, and may, always to begin, not in how one wants it all or to ever lose hope. It did help all see that way could come to last forever. What started so separate had found joy beyond what may hold to be. And what was then was ready to become new art,